In the quiet hours of the night, when the world has slowed to a gentle hush, the mind often finds itself wandering toward the unanswered questions that linger at the edges of human understanding. This documentary begins in that soft, drifting state, where curiosity lives but urgency dissolves, and where stories of the unknown feel less like threats and more like distant echoes carried on a calm breeze. It's in this peaceful space that the mystery of the reptilian phenomenon unfolds, not as a loud conspiracy or a sensational tale, but as a long, winding thread woven through history, folklore, psychology, and the modern search for extraterrestrial life. For generations, humans have been drawn to the idea that something exists behind the curtain of ordinary life. Whether rooted in superstition, spirituality, or scientific curiosity, this instinct to imagine hidden forces has shaped entire cultures. Tonight, rather than examine those instincts with judgment or disbelief, we move through them slowly and thoughtfully, recognizing that mystery has always been part of the human experience. The concept of reptilian beings, often framed as ancient, intelligent, and elusive, represents one of the most intricate and emotionally charged narratives within UFO lore. Yet beneath the sensational surface lies a network of historical patterns, symbolic meanings, and psychological interpretations that make the topic far deeper than it first appears. As the world changed over centuries, stories of serpent-like entities transformed with it. Ancient mythologies began blending with modern science fiction. Folklore absorbed the language of extraterrestrial encounters. Government secrecy during the Cold War fed a desire for hidden explanations. And through it all, the idea of non-human intelligences walking among us, unseen, powerful, and strategically involved in human affairs, captured imaginations in a way few narratives ever have. But as intriguing as these notions are, they must also be approached gently, with an awareness of how memory, belief, and trauma can shape perception. Many researchers note that stories of shadowy, shape-shifting figures often reflect deeper fears about authority, control, and the fragility of trust in institutions. At the same time, eyewitness testimonies from individuals who vividly recall encounters with reptilian beings remind us that not all experiences fit neatly into psychological explanations. In this series, the aim is not to prove or disprove any particular claim. Instead, the journey is about understanding how such a powerful mythos came to exist and why it continues to resonate so strongly. Some find comfort in the idea that humanity is not alone. Others feel unsettled by the possibility of hidden watchers guiding events behind the scenes. Both responses reveal something important about the human mind. Our perception of the unknown often mirrors our perception of ourselves. And when a mystery stretches across cultures and generations, it becomes more than just a theory. It becomes a reflection of collective memory and shared imagination. This opening segment offers a gentle transition into the deeper chapters ahead. Each part of the documentary will explore one layer of the reptilian phenomenon, its ancient origins, its emergence in modern UFO culture, the eyewitness stories that keep the narrative alive, and the governmental secrecy that fuels speculation. Along the way, psychological theories, historical events, and cultural influences will help illuminate how the story evolved into the form we recognize today. With each section, the pacing will remain slow and calming, encouraging the listener to drift deeper into thought without any sense of urgency. For now, as you settle in and breathe softly, imagine this investigation not as a hunt for answers, but as a guided exploration through the corridors of myth and mystery. The world is full of stories that live just beneath the surface, stories that shape how we understand power, identity, and the unknown. The reptilian narrative is one of those stories. It has roots that reach into ancient civilizations, branches that extend across modern conspiracies, and leaves that brush against our deepest questions about what hides behind the veil of the ordinary. Tonight, we begin by acknowledging the weight of that mystery, and by allowing ourselves to step quietly and without fear into the shadows where the story first begins. Across the vast span of human history, certain symbols reappear so consistently that they seem woven into our collective memory. Among the most enduring of these is the image of the serpent or reptilian being, mysterious, wise, powerful, and sometimes ominous. As we drift deeper into the quiet of the night, this section explores how ancient cultures across the world described figures that, in modern times, some interpret as early references to reptilian entities. Whether literal, symbolic, or mythological, these stories create a foundation far older than any contemporary UFO narrative. The goal here is not to claim direct connections, but to gently examine how motifs from ancient civilizations may have influenced or foreshadowed the modern imagination. In Mesopotamia, one of humanity's earliest civilizations, artwork and mythology often depicted gods with serpent-like attributes. The deity Ningish Zida, for example, was represented as a serpent with a human head or intertwined snakes rising from the earth. Some archaeologists have pointed to the Ubaid figurines, thousands of years old, as striking artifacts. Humanoid bodies with elongated faces, almond-shaped eyes, and lizard-like features. While mainstream scholars interpret these figurines as symbolic or stylistic, others have wondered whether the shapes reflect something more unusual. Whether they represent gods, spiritual archetypes, or artistic conventions, their reptilian aesthetic has fueled decades of speculation in alternative research circles. Moving east, ancient Hindu and Buddhist texts speak of the Nagas, serpent beings capable of shifting between human and reptilian forms. They lived in underground or underwater realms, often interacting with humanity as guardians, teachers, or powerful adversaries. Their stories blend spirituality with an almost extraterrestrial quality, describing beings who were intelligent, technologically advanced, and deeply intertwined with the natural world. In many accounts, the Nagas possessed secret knowledge and complex hierarchies, traits that later mirrored the structure of modern reptilian theories. Historians usually interpret Nagas as mythological representations of the natural forces associated with rivers and caves, but the imagery continues to spark the imagination of those seeking deeper connections. In Mesoamerica, cultures such as the Aztec and Maya revered deities like Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who was believed to bring wisdom, culture, and civilization itself. This god was depicted as both divine and transformative, able to influence the fate of entire empires. Scholars agree that these figures were symbolic, yet the recurring motif of a powerful serpentine being guiding humanity's development resonates strongly with modern ideas about otherworldly intervention. Whether these figures were intended as metaphors for natural forces or representations of ancient leaders, their reptilian nature remains intriguing in hindsight. Ancient Egypt, too, contains whispers of serpent symbolism woven into royal and spiritual imagery. The uraeus, a cobra emblem worn on the crowns of pharaohs, symbolized divine authority and protection. Serpent beings such as Apep represented chaos, while others guarded sacred realms or the passage to the afterlife. Though these stories come from a context rooted firmly in religion and symbolic cosmology, they deepen the global consistency of reptilian themes. Beings of power, transformation, and influence appearing across cultures that never communicated with each other. In the early 20th century, long after these civilizations had risen and fallen, new interpretations began to emerge. Occultists, theosophists, and esoteric researchers like Helena Blavatsky suggested that ancient cultures might have interacted with non-human intelligences, beings that guided or shaped early civilization. These ideas were speculative, yet they laid the intellectual groundwork for the later UFO phenomenon. As modern science fiction blossomed and global communication expanded, the archetype of a reptilian intelligence resurfaced, not as a deity, but as an extraterrestrial or interdimensional presence. Anthropologists often argue that serpents became powerful symbols because of their natural traits. Their ability to shed skin, their silent movement, their dual nature of danger and wisdom. Psychologists, especially those influenced by Carl Jung, propose that serpent beings represent universal human archetypes tied to transformation, fear, and the unknown. From a mythological perspective, reptiles embody both creation and destruction, making them ideal figures for stories about cosmic influence. Even skeptics acknowledge that such recurring symbolism across multiple cultures speaks to something deeply rooted in human consciousness. Yet, for those drawn to alternative theories, these ancient stories hint at something beyond symbolism, a long-standing memory or echo of interactions with non-human beings. While mainstream academia doesn't support literal reptilian entities in ancient history, the consistency of these motifs provides fertile ground for speculation, especially when placed alongside modern accounts that describe similar beings. As we move forward, the aim is not to prove that these ancient figures were extraterrestrials, but to observe how the imagery of reptilian intelligence evolved over millennia. Whether myth, metaphor, or misinterpreted experience, these early depictions created a narrative environment in which the modern reptilian phenomenon could later take root. Here, in the soft quiet of night, the past feels closer, and the boundary between mythology and mystery seems to thin, inviting us to slowly continue this journey from ancient echoes to modern interpretations. As the world entered the 20th century, humanity found itself standing at the edge of unprecedented change. Scientific breakthroughs, global conflict, and rapid technological progress created a collective atmosphere of curiosity mixed with anxiety. This environment would quietly shape the birth of modern UFO culture, and eventually, the emergence of the reptilian narrative as we recognize it today. Yet the story does not begin with creatures hiding in shadows. It begins with people searching for meaning during uncertain times, looking to the skies for answers that earthbound institutions could not provide. In the 1950s, the Cold War cast a long and unsettling shadow across daily life. Nations feared nuclear catastrophe. Governments accelerated their intelligence operations, and ordinary citizens felt caught between secrecy and suspicion. During this time, unexplained aerial sightings became increasingly common. Some were later identified as experimental aircraft or atmospheric phenomena, but many remained unresolved, creating fertile ground for speculation. The U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book attempted to catalog and analyze these reports, but its selective transparency left the public with more questions than answers. When official explanations felt incomplete, imaginations filled in the blanks. Within this atmosphere, the first modern contactee stories appeared. Individuals such as George Adamski claimed to have encountered peaceful, human-like extraterrestrials who offered warnings about war and environmental destruction. These early narratives were hopeful, portraying aliens as guides or guardians rather than threats. However, as the Cold War progressed and distrust grew stronger, the tone of UFO stories shifted dramatically. Reports of abductions, medical examinations, and manipulation began to surface in the 1960s and 1970s. Fear and fascination blended into a new psychological landscape where otherworldly beings were no longer benevolent visitors, but potential intruders. It was within this changing cultural climate that the early foundations of the reptilian theory began to form. Some researchers studying abduction accounts noted descriptions of tall, imposing figures with scaled skin or serpent-like eyes. These scattered reports lacked a unified framework, but planted seeds that would later grow into a more defined concept. Science fiction also contributed to the shift. Throughout the mid-20th century, films and novels increasingly portrayed alien species as infiltrators capable of blending into human society. These fictional themes mirrored the real geopolitical anxieties of espionage, covert operations, and hidden agendas. Psychologists have long argued that the imagery of infiltration and shape-shifting reflects the public's fear of invisible threats, agents, or ideologies operating behind closed doors. During the Cold War, this fear was magnified by the secrecy surrounding intelligence agencies and classified military programs. When governments refused to disclose details about unknown aerial encounters, even for legitimate security reasons, the lack of transparency inadvertently strengthened the belief that something larger was being concealed. What began as caution grew into speculation, and speculation slowly morphed into elaborate theories. By the late 20th century, independent researchers and fringe theorists began weaving together ancient serpent lore, modern UFO sightings, and geopolitical fears into a cohesive story. Figures like John Rhodes were among the first to publicly discuss reptilian beings in a structured way, proposing that subterranean or extraterrestrial reptoid species had interacted with humans throughout history. Later, David Icke's work brought the topic into mainstream awareness, presenting reptilian entities as manipulative forces involved in global power structures. Though controversial and widely criticized, these ideas resonated with audiences who already felt disconnected from institutions and uncertain about the future. From an analytical standpoint, the rise of reptilian theories during this period can be seen as a symbolic reflection of societal tensions. As governments grew more technologically advanced and less transparent, the public faced a widening gap between what they observed and what they were told. Conspiracy narratives, reptilian or otherwise, offered a way to make sense of complex global systems that felt distant and unexplainable. Instead of seeing political or economic issues as chaotic, people found a structured, if unsettling, story in which hidden forces guided events. Yet despite the psychological and cultural interpretations, eyewitness reports continued to surface. Some described encounters during sleep paralysis, while others reported vivid, conscious experiences. A few claimed to have seen beings with unmistakably reptilian features, either in physical form or within altered states of awareness. Whether these accounts arose from dream states, subconscious fears, or something entirely unknown, they added to the growing mosaic of modern reptilian lore. As the century drew to a close, technology accelerated communication and made it easier for theories to spread without institutional gatekeeping. Online forums allowed individuals from across the world to share experiences and compare details, reinforcing patterns and shaping a collective narrative. The concept of reptilian entities evolved from scattered reports into a complex mythology woven through modern UFO culture. In the soft, quiet hours of the night, when we look back at this history, the emergence of the reptilian idea no longer appears sudden or isolated. It feels like a natural convergence of fear, curiosity, symbolism, and secrecy. An evolving story shaped as much by human psychology as by the mysteries of the unknown. And as we move deeper into this exploration, the boundary between cultural creation and unexplained experience becomes increasingly blurred, guiding us toward the next layer of this enigmatic phenomenon. Throughout the decades, countless individuals have come forward with personal accounts of encounters that defy ordinary explanation. Many of these experiences are deeply vivid, described with a level of detail that suggests something more than fleeting imagination. In the quiet of the night, it is in these stories, the intimate, personal testimonies, that the modern reptilian phenomenon comes alive. Rather than focusing on sensational headlines or exaggerated claims, we examine the patterns and consistencies that emerge across multiple accounts, allowing listeners to drift into a reflective understanding of the human experience at the heart of these mysteries. Some witnesses describe beings of remarkable height and presence, often humanoid in form, but marked by distinct reptilian features: scaly skin, angular facial structures, piercing eyes, and sometimes clawed hands or muscular frames. These figures are frequently reported as moving with deliberate grace, often exuding an almost overwhelming sense of authority. While some encounters are fleeting, a shadow glimpsed in a peripheral hallway, a feeling of intense observation, others are far more immersive, involving interactions that the experiencer recalls in vivid, even tactile detail. Researchers have noted that many accounts share similar elements, suggesting that cultural influence, collective archetypes, or deep-seated psychological responses may be at play. Yet the realism described by witnesses often strikes even trained investigators as strikingly coherent, blending the eerie with the mundane. Sleep paralysis offers one possible explanation for some experiences. During this phenomenon, individuals awaken while their bodies remain temporarily immobilized, often accompanied by intense hallucinations of figures in the room. While neurological studies provide a grounded framework for understanding these events, the content of the hallucinations, sometimes humanoid, sometimes reptilian, reveals much about the subconscious mind and the archetypes it holds. Some researchers argue that these visions reflect internalized fears of authority or invasion, externalized into tangible forms during moments of vulnerability. Yet for those who experience these encounters consciously, the sensations of observation, communication, or even manipulation often feel profoundly real, leaving an impression that persists for a lifetime. Abduction narratives add another layer of complexity. Individuals recount being taken into unknown environments, sometimes described as sterile, metallic spaces illuminated by unfamiliar lighting. Within these spaces, reptilian figures are said to conduct examinations, communicate telepathically, or observe human behavior with methodical precision. Many who report these experiences note a mixture of fear and awe, a deep recognition of intelligence coupled with an instinctive wariness. Psychologists studying these narratives often suggest that the human mind constructs frameworks to interpret experiences that defy conventional memory or understanding. Even so, the shared imagery of tall, commanding, reptilian beings suggests a recurring symbolic motif that resonates beyond individual imagination. Some witnesses describe interactions that imply hierarchical or strategic intent. These beings are not portrayed as chaotic or malevolent in the traditional sense, but as calculating and deliberate, with goals that are often opaque. Such descriptions have fueled speculation about hidden agendas, whether metaphorical, psychological, or literal. Researchers and skeptics alike emphasize that while the veracity of any single account cannot be confirmed, the collective patterns are striking. Recurring physical characteristics, behavioral tendencies, and emotional impacts appear across multiple reports spanning decades and continents. This repetition invites questions about whether the stories reflect something external or emerge from a shared psychological framework shaped by culture, mythology, and contemporary fears. Beyond the physical and behavioral descriptions, many witnesses report intense, emotional responses. Some feel their personal autonomy challenged or experience profound unease, while others report a strange fascination or even respect toward these beings. The psychological dimension is essential to understanding why these accounts endure. It is not only what is seen, but what is felt, the subtle undercurrent of observation, control, and intelligence that leaves a lasting impression. This emotional resonance ensures that the reptilian archetype remains compelling, not just as an image, but as an experience embedded in memory. It is also worth noting that cultural context can shape perception. Individuals raised on stories of serpent gods, shape-shifting villains, or science fiction narratives may unconsciously integrate these motifs into their personal encounters. Yet even when such influence is considered, the sheer consistency of descriptions, from scaly skin to imposing stature, from telepathic impressions to subtle manipulations, presents a puzzle that continues to intrigue researchers. Anthropologists, psychologists, and ufologists alike acknowledge that these experiences, whether fully understood or not, reveal something profound about the human mind's capacity to interpret and give form to the unknown. As night deepens and the world outside softens into silence, the stories of these witnesses provide a bridge between the past and the present, myth and experience, imagination and reality. They remind us that encounters, real or perceived, carry weight not only in what they depict, but in how they shape our understanding of unseen forces. In the gentle rhythm of reflection, the testimonies create a quiet yet persistent presence, guiding the listener further into the mystery of the reptilian phenomenon, where history, psychology, and human perception intertwine in ways both subtle and profound. As the stories of unusual beings persisted, they began to intersect with the murky world of government secrecy and classified programs. Throughout the Cold War and beyond, nations invested heavily in defense, surveillance, and intelligence operations, leaving vast swaths of activity shrouded from public view. It is within these gaps of knowledge that speculation about hidden forces, both human and otherwise, naturally emerged. For decades, official reports on unidentified aerial phenomena were sparse, technical, and often dismissive, leaving ordinary citizens to fill in the blanks with imagination, rumor, and sometimes fear. Declassified documents from programs like Project Blue Book in the United States provide a glimpse into this tension between official narrative and public perception. While the majority of cases were attributed to misidentified aircraft, weather phenomena, or hoaxes, a small percentage remained unexplained. Analysts and historians note that the language of these reports, clinical, careful, and at times vague, contributed to a sense of mystery. Citizens unable to access the full story often imagined that the unknown extended beyond mere aircraft, potentially encompassing intelligent and deliberate beings with motives that were opaque and strategic. The silence of authorities, whether intentional or procedural, inadvertently nurtured a fertile ground for speculative thought. Some individuals who claim insider knowledge have gone further, asserting that certain governments have been aware of non-human entities for decades. Whistleblowers and former military personnel have described encounters with figures resembling reptilian beings, suggesting they operate in hidden or subterranean facilities, often beyond the reach of ordinary oversight. These accounts describe elaborate subterranean networks, advanced technology, and observation protocols that resemble the methodical approach attributed to intelligence agencies. While mainstream verification remains absent, the persistence of these stories underscores a broader pattern. Humans have long projected narratives of control and hierarchy onto the unknown, especially when the details of real-world power structures remain obscure. Analysts studying the cultural impact of these claims suggest that the combination of secrecy and speculation is a potent force. Historical events, such as the rise of surveillance technologies, classified aerospace testing, and covert operations, create a context in which extraordinary stories feel plausible. The public's imagination is naturally drawn to the idea that there might be powerful entities working behind the scenes, orchestrating events beyond ordinary perception. When stories describe beings who are both intelligent and hidden, the overlap between metaphorical fears of authority and literal interpretations of the unknown becomes nearly seamless. The alleged activities of these beings, as described by witnesses and self-proclaimed insiders, often emphasize subtle manipulation rather than overt confrontation. Some narratives suggest that reptilian entities are not chaotic invaders, but strategic overseers, observing human activity, influencing decisions, and maintaining a long-term plan. While there is no concrete evidence to substantiate these claims, their very structure mirrors human concepts of power, governance, and surveillance. Psychologists note that the mind often anthropomorphizes uncertainty, projecting familiar patterns onto ambiguous stimuli. In this sense, the stories of hidden watchers reflect both a fascination with intelligence and a deep-seated wariness of unseen authority. Media coverage has played a critical role in amplifying and shaping these perceptions. Sensational stories, even when clearly speculative, often become touchpoints for collective imagination. Newspapers, television programs, and more recently, online forums allow individuals to share and compare experiences, reinforcing the belief in hidden entities. Researchers studying information diffusion have found that when official sources offer limited transparency, alternative narratives flourish, gaining legitimacy through repetition and consistency. The reptilian motif, with its blend of authority, alien otherness, and historical resonance, is particularly effective in capturing public attention. Some historians point out that secrecy itself is a historical constant, from hidden religious rites to classified military operations, and that mystery has always invited narrative projection. In the case of the reptilian phenomenon, the combination of historical myth, contemporary reports, and limited governmental disclosure creates a multi-layered story. Witness accounts, insider testimonies, and speculative research intertwine to form a narrative that feels coherent, even if proof remains elusive. The allure lies not in verification alone, but in the interplay between what is known, what is concealed, and what is imagined. As we settle into this quiet reflection, it becomes clear that the narratives of hidden beings are inseparable from the broader context of secrecy and authority. Whether viewed as metaphor, psychological projection, or an unexplained reality, they reveal something profound about human cognition, the need to structure uncertainty, to seek patterns, and to find meaning in the unseen. In this calm space, listeners can consider how the reptilian phenomenon continues to thrive in part because it inhabits the spaces left empty by mystery, official silence, and the human mind's natural curiosity. When exploring a phenomenon as layered and enigmatic as the reptilian narrative, it becomes essential to examine the many interpretive frameworks people use to make sense of it. Not every witness, researcher, or skeptic views these accounts through the same lens. Instead, the story branches into multiple perspectives: psychological, metaphysical, symbolic, and extraterrestrial, each offering its own explanation for why so many individuals across cultures report encounters with reptilian beings. By moving gently through these viewpoints, we begin to see how the human mind weaves together memory, belief, culture, and emotion to form a coherent sense of reality, even when the subject itself remains elusive. From a psychological standpoint, reptilian beings can be interpreted as manifestations of deeply rooted archetypes. Carl Jung proposed that the human psyche contains universal symbols inherited across cultures, and the serpent archetype stands among the most ancient and potent. It represents transformation, fear, forbidden knowledge, and the shadow elements of the self, those aspects we struggle to acknowledge. When people undergo intense emotional or neurological states, the mind may draw upon these symbols to give shape to internal conflict. Some psychologists argue that abduction narratives involving reptilian figures may reflect subconscious fears related to authority, intrusion, or vulnerability. These interpretations do not diminish the realism felt by witnesses, but instead highlight how powerful inner imagery can become when the brain seeks to process stress, trauma, or disrupted sleep states. At the same time, scientific skeptics approach these accounts through a neurological and cognitive lens. They argue that many experiences, especially those occurring at night, may be linked to sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, or the brain's tendency to fill sensory gaps in moments of uncertainty. When someone wakes unable to move, with a boundary between dreaming and consciousness still blurred, the mind may project images that align with cultural expectations or personal fears. The reptilian form, already embedded in mythology and popular media, becomes an easily accessible template for the imagination. Cognitive scientists note that humans are highly pattern-oriented, and when confronted with ambiguous shapes or sensations, we instinctively assign familiar forms, especially those associated with danger or authority. Yet psychological explanations only address part of the story. For many witnesses and researchers, the reptilian phenomenon carries a metaphysical or interdimensional component. This perspective suggests that the beings described are not physical in the conventional sense, but exist in realms adjacent to human perception. According to this view, encounters occur through altered states of consciousness, dreams, meditation, trauma-induced dissociation, or spiritually heightened experiences. The reptilian appearance, then, may be symbolic rather than anatomical, representing an energetic or archetypal intelligence interacting with human minds. Modern metaphysical thinkers propose that these entities communicate through intuition, telepathy, or symbolic imagery, shaping their form in ways that the human psyche can interpret. Whether seen as guardians, teachers, or reflections of the subconscious, this framework portrays reptilian beings as manifestations of a larger, unseen reality. On the other end of the spectrum lies the extraterrestrial interpretation, which takes the accounts more literally. Proponents of this theory argue that reptilian beings may represent genuine non-human species, biological or hybrid, evolving separately from humanity, either on distant worlds or within hidden regions of Earth, such as subterranean bases or deep oceans. Some suggest that these beings possess advanced technology, strategic intelligence, and long-term plans involving human civilization. While hard evidence remains absent, supporters note the consistency of certain details across independent reports: hierarchical behavior, telepathic communication, and an aura of authority or strategic intent. To those who hold this view, the psychological or symbolic explanations alone are insufficient to account for the physical sensations, shared descriptions, and intense emotional impact reported by witnesses. Cultural theorists offer yet another interpretation, suggesting that reptilian narratives may serve as metaphors for societal anxieties. In times of political uncertainty, economic instability, or rapid technological change, people often create stories that externalize fears of manipulation or loss of control. The idea of hidden beings infiltrating leadership roles mirrors real-world concerns about corruption, surveillance, and the widening gap between citizens and institutions. By giving these anxieties a physical form, scaled skin, piercing eyes, deliberate intelligence, the mind transforms abstract fears into something tangible and confrontable. This does not render the stories false, but rather highlights how myth evolves as a psychological tool for understanding complex emotional landscapes. Despite the differences among these interpretations, they all share one key insight. The human experience of the unknown is profoundly influenced by perception, memory, and cultural context. Whether encounters with reptilian beings are symbolic projections, neurological events, spiritual interactions, or literal events, they reveal the extraordinary capacity of the human mind to seek meaning. In the quiet hours of contemplation, these competing explanations begin to feel less like contradictions and more like parallel paths attempting to illuminate the same enigmatic source. And as we drift deeper into the unfolding narrative, each perspective contributes a piece to the intricate puzzle of how humanity perceives and processes the mysterious forces that shape our world. As the stories of reptilian beings moved beyond the private experiences of witnesses, they began to leave a subtle but persistent mark on culture, media, and imagination. Art, literature, and entertainment became mirrors reflecting these mysterious narratives, translating the archetypal fear and fascination into forms that could be shared, examined, and contemplated. From films to novels, and later through the vast expanses of the internet, the reptilian motif transformed from an isolated idea into a recurring theme in the collective consciousness. These cultural echoes did not merely entertain. They reinforced certain images, behaviors, and archetypes, creating a feedback loop between imagination and experience that continues to shape public perception. In the late 20th century, science fiction and television brought reptilian concepts into the mainstream. The 1980s television series V portrayed lizard-like aliens infiltrating human society, presenting a visual narrative that resonated with fears of hidden influence and covert manipulation. Although fictional, these portrayals drew heavily on pre-existing myths, historical serpent symbolism, and contemporary anxieties about espionage and authority. Cultural historians note that repeated exposure to such imagery primes the imagination, making certain forms and behaviors more recognizable, even in dreams or subjective experiences. In this sense, media acts as both a reflection of collective concern and a lens through which the human mind interprets the unknown. Literature, too, has played a role in weaving the reptilian motif into popular culture. From esoteric books speculating on hidden powers to science fiction novels imagining intelligent alien species, authors have explored the intersection of control, secrecy, and otherness. These stories often present reptilian beings not merely as monsters, but as complex figures with intelligence, hierarchy, and purpose. By framing them in narrative form, writers allow readers to explore societal fears, philosophical questions, and moral dilemmas in a safe, contemplative space. Even skeptical observers acknowledge that recurring motifs across literature and folklore suggest a persistent resonance, a symbolic language that transcends individual works and taps into deep-seated psychological patterns. The advent of the internet dramatically accelerated the spread and evolution of reptilian ideas. Forums, chat groups, and online communities enabled individuals to share first-hand experiences, discuss historical accounts, and compare interpretations in real time. What had once been a collection of scattered narratives now became a cohesive, albeit informal, cultural movement. Memes, digital art, and speculative essays reinforced consistent images, scaly skin, humanoid posture, intense eyes, and strategic intent. The participatory nature of online culture means that these ideas are not static. They evolve as new stories, media, and technologies intersect, continually shaping the collective understanding of reptilian beings. Beyond entertainment and digital spaces, reptilian themes appear in symbolic and political discourse, often unconsciously. Conspiracy theorists, for example, frequently employ reptilian imagery to represent hidden control, manipulation, or elite influence. Anthropologists and cultural theorists observe that these narratives allow abstract anxieties about authority and societal complexity to take tangible form. By embodying fears in a concrete figure, communities can discuss, analyze, and emotionally process concerns that might otherwise remain diffuse or overwhelming. The reptilian, in this sense, becomes both a character in a story and a mirror reflecting the uncertainties and tensions of the real world. Even in subtle ways, these cultural influences can shape perception. Individuals steeped in media depictions of reptilian beings may unconsciously integrate these images into dreams, intuitive experiences, or even recollections of unusual phenomena. The line between myth, media, and memory blurs, creating experiences that feel authentic and vivid. Scholars studying folklore and cultural transmission note that repeated exposure to symbolic imagery can crystallize motifs across generations, providing a shared visual and emotional language that persists regardless of empirical verification. Despite the blend of entertainment, speculation, and symbolic interpretation, the cultural significance of reptilian narratives is profound. They demonstrate how stories, rooted in ancient archetypes, modern anxieties, and imaginative speculation, can evolve into persistent threads woven through art, media, and collective consciousness. Each film, novel, forum discussion, or online illustration contributes to a tapestry that not only entertains, but shapes the ways people perceive the unknown. The reptilian motif, in this sense, transcends the literal question of existence, becoming a vessel through which society explores authority, fear, secrecy, and the boundaries between human understanding and the mysterious. As night deepens and listeners settle into quiet reflection, it becomes clear that the influence of these stories reaches far beyond mere fascination. They act as bridges between imagination and experience, myth and modernity, cultural archetypes and personal encounters. By observing how the motif has traveled through literature, media, and digital culture, we begin to understand why these images persist in both the collective imagination and individual consciousness. They are more than stories. They are living symbols, quietly shaping how humanity continues to engage with the unknown, the hidden, and the profoundly mysterious. In recent decades, the study of unidentified aerial phenomena and alleged non-human entities has moved into a more technologically advanced and methodical phase. While mainstream science maintains a cautious distance from claims of reptilian beings, modern investigative tools and renewed governmental interest in unexplained phenomena have brought new rigor to the field. Pilots, military personnel, and civilians report encounters that, when combined with radar anomalies, satellite data, and high-resolution imaging, defy easy explanation. Although the focus is typically on aircraft or anomalous objects, rather than intelligent reptilian species specifically, the intersection of credible sightings and personal testimonies provides fertile ground for deeper inquiry and reflection. Modern investigations often begin with data collection, using instruments designed to capture phenomena that might otherwise go unnoticed. Infrared imaging, radar tracking, and high-speed cameras have recorded instances of rapid movement, sudden disappearance, or unexplained flight patterns. These technical reports, while neutral and descriptive, leave open the question of intent or origin. For some observers, the behaviors and characteristics described align with earlier accounts of beings who seem strategic, intelligent, and deliberate, qualities that echo descriptions of reptilian figures from decades past. The combination of objective measurement and subjective experience creates a layered narrative, one that is at once grounded and mysterious. Eyewitness testimony continues to play a central role in modern inquiry. Pilots describe sensations of being observed or monitored, reporting experiences that extend beyond simple visual anomalies. Some note lights that seem to follow their movement, or forms that appear briefly in peripheral vision, disappearing upon closer inspection. While skeptics emphasize perceptual errors or atmospheric explanations, The emotional intensity and consistency of these reports are striking. Many investigators, including those in ufology and psychological research, acknowledge that these accounts offer important insight into how humans interact with phenomena that resist conventional understanding. Subterranean and remote investigations have also emerged as a focus, inspired in part by historical claims of hidden bases or hidden species. Ground-penetrating radar, sonar mapping, and satellite imagery have revealed geological structures that some speculate could house unknown life forms or serve as observation points. While the scientific consensus often interprets these features as natural formations, the continued fascination with hidden networks mirrors centuries-old narratives of beings operating beyond human perception. Researchers carefully document these findings, emphasizing evidence and observation while leaving interpretation open, allowing listeners to consider the possibility of hidden intelligences without pressure to reach immediate conclusions. The use of technology has not only expanded the scope of observation, but also the accessibility of information. Digital archives, interactive maps, and citizen science projects enable the public to engage with unexplained phenomena in ways previously impossible. This democratization of research has both strengthened and complicated the narrative. Patterns, consistencies, and anomalies can now be shared globally, generating collective databases that document subtle connections between modern sightings and historic accounts. At the same time, the proliferation of reports challenges investigators to differentiate between verifiable data and culturally reinforced expectations, requiring careful discernment and critical thinking. Analysts note that the persistence of reptilian narratives in this modern context is as much psychological as it is observational. The consistent motifs, scaled skin, humanoid form, and strategic intelligence, recur across decades and continents, often paralleling shifts in technology, politics, and social perception. Even when physical evidence is absent, the repetition of these themes underscores the human mind's capacity to recognize patterns and construct meaning. Modern investigators often emphasize that understanding the phenomenon requires attention not only to potential external realities, but also to the cognitive frameworks through which witnesses interpret their experiences. As technology and methodology continue to evolve, so too does the conversation surrounding these mysteries. Advanced imaging, AI-assisted data analysis, and improved recording devices provide unprecedented opportunities to capture anomalies. Yet the fundamental questions remain. Are these experiences symbolic, neurological, or literal encounters with intelligent beings? How do cultural archetypes, personal psychology, and historical narratives influence perception? And perhaps most intriguingly, what does the persistence of these reports reveal about humanity's desire to explore the unknown, even in the comfort of modern observation? In the calm hours of reflection, it becomes evident that modern investigations offer both clarity and ambiguity. They ground the phenomenon in observable patterns while preserving the essential mystery that has captivated human imagination for centuries. Whether through data, testimony, or technological observation, these inquiries invite a gentle, contemplative exploration of what lies beyond ordinary perception. In this quiet space, listeners can appreciate the ongoing search for understanding, not only of the world outside, but of the inner landscapes of human curiosity, imagination, and the enduring allure of the unseen. The persistence of the reptilian narrative across history, culture, and individual experience invites reflection on why such stories continue to hold sway over the human imagination. At first glance, it may seem remarkable that accounts of scaly humanoid beings, often described with intelligence, strategic intent, and subtle control, have persisted for decades, if not centuries. Yet when we pause and consider the deeper psychological, cultural, and existential currents that underlie these tales, the enduring appeal of the reptilian phenomenon becomes less surprising and far more illuminating. These stories are not merely curiosities or entertainment. They function as mirrors of human fears, hopes, and the complex interplay between perception and reality. Across civilizations, the image of the serpent or reptile has consistently carried dual meanings: creation and destruction, wisdom and danger, transformation and continuity. ancient cultures, from the Mesopotamian and Egyptian civilizations to Mesoamerica and South Asia, imbued serpent-like beings with power, often portraying them as intermediaries between humanity and the divine, guardians of hidden knowledge, or symbols of transformative processes. These archetypes are deeply embedded in the collective unconscious, reflecting psychological patterns that shape how humans interpret the unknown. Modern interpretations of reptilian entities, whether as extraterrestrials, interdimensional beings, or symbolic archetypes, may simply be contemporary manifestations of these age-old motifs. In this sense, the stories endure not because of concrete proof, but because they resonate with fundamental aspects of human cognition and cultural memory. Psychologists and anthropologists alike suggest that the reptilian phenomenon addresses core human anxieties about control, autonomy, and the unknown. The beings are often described as overseeing human events, subtly influencing decisions, or existing in hidden hierarchies that shape the course of history. These descriptions mirror real-world experiences of authority and power, where much of what influences our lives is invisible, complex, or difficult to comprehend. The reptilian archetype provides a tangible form to abstract concerns, offering a narrative framework that makes uncertainty and potential manipulation feel perceivable. The stories, then, function as both a reflection of societal structures and a coping mechanism, allowing individuals to process anxieties in a narrative form. The emotional intensity associated with these narratives cannot be overstated. Witnesses frequently report feelings of awe, fear, or profound unease during encounters, and even when recounted decades later, these emotions remain vivid. The emotional resonance suggests that the stories persist not merely because of cultural reinforcement, but because of their psychological impact. The reptilian beings serve as a focal point for the mind's attention, a symbolic embodiment of the tension between vulnerability and agency, awareness and helplessness. Even those who approach the accounts skeptically often admit that the imagery and emotional charge leave a lingering impression, a quiet curiosity that persists long after conscious reflection has ended. Cultural transmission amplifies the endurance of these narratives. Stories of reptilian beings, whether rooted in mythology, folklore, or modern testimony, are reinforced through literature, media, and the digital landscape. Television series, films, novels, and online forums circulate these ideas, providing repeated exposure to the motifs of scaly skin, imposing stature, and hidden influence. As these images circulate, they create a shared visual and conceptual language that frames new experiences and interpretations. In this way, cultural exposure shapes perception, memory, and expectation, creating a cycle in which mythology, imagination, and anecdotal experience continually feed into each other. Yet the longevity of the reptilian narrative cannot be fully explained by psychology or culture alone. The phenomenon also resonates with broader philosophical and existential questions about humanity's place in the universe. Humans have always looked outward, seeking signs of other life, higher intelligence, or forces beyond immediate comprehension. The reptilian archetype, in this light, embodies the tension between curiosity and caution, fascination and fear. It asks, what if we are not the only intelligent beings influencing the course of events? What if the world is shaped, in part, by forces beyond our perception? The questions themselves, regardless of the literal truth of the stories, engage the mind and imagination, ensuring the narrative's continued relevance. The interplay of secrecy and speculation further reinforces the endurance of reptilian narratives. Historical events, such as the Cold War, classified military programs, and government surveillance, created gaps in public knowledge, gaps that the imagination readily fills. Whistleblower accounts, declassified documents, and ongoing debates about unidentified aerial phenomena contribute to a sense that some truths remain just beyond reach. The reptilian motif provides a framework for understanding these gaps, a story that imbues ambiguity with shape, structure, and purpose. It is a reminder that across history, humans have always sought coherence in the face of uncertainty, often crafting elaborate narratives that blend fact, interpretation, and imagination. Modern investigations and technological advancements continue to play a role in keeping the phenomenon alive. Radar anomalies, high-speed imaging, and satellite observations provide data points that, while often ambiguous, feed curiosity and speculation. The intersection of objective measurement and subjective testimony mirrors the historical pattern, tangible observation coupled with interpretive storytelling. Even in the absence of definitive evidence, the consistency of patterns, physical descriptions, behavioral tendencies, and strategic qualities encourages ongoing interest. The persistence of these reports suggests a human need to explore the unknown, to map it in a way that is coherent and narratively satisfying, even when certainty remains elusive. Importantly, the endurance of the reptilian narrative highlights the human capacity for wonder and contemplation. In a world increasingly defined by empirical data, instant communication, and measurable outcomes, stories of unseen intelligences invite reflection on what lies beyond immediate perception. They remind us that not all knowledge can be quantified, that imagination and curiosity are as vital to human experience as observation and logic. In this sense, the narrative serves a dual function. It engages critical thinking while nurturing a quiet, reflective space for wonder, speculation, and emotional processing. The stories also offer insight into the interplay between fear and fascination. The reptilian archetype is compelling precisely because it embodies the tension between threat and intrigue, authority and mystery, concealment and revelation. By externalizing these dynamics into a coherent image, the narrative provides a safe yet emotionally charged space to explore deep-seated anxieties about power, autonomy, and the unknown. This balancing act of apprehension and curiosity ensures that the stories remain both captivating and thought-provoking, sustaining interest across generations. Ultimately, the reptilian phenomenon endures because it sits at the intersection of psychology, culture, and existential inquiry. It is simultaneously a mirror of human fears, a vessel for imagination, and a symbol of the unknown. Whether interpreted as literal beings, metaphorical constructs, or archetypal symbols, these narratives persist because they resonate with essential aspects of the human experience: our desire for understanding, our sensitivity to hidden power, and our fascination with mysteries that stretch beyond ordinary perception. The stories survive not simply because of what is seen or imagined, but because they engage with the timeless human impulse to explore the unseen, to seek patterns in chaos, and to contemplate the boundaries of reality itself. As we drift toward the close of this exploration, it becomes clear that the endurance of these narratives is itself part of the mystery. They reveal not only the layers of culture, history, and personal experience that have shaped them, but also the fundamental nature of human consciousness. Curious, reflective, and ever drawn to what lies beyond the immediately visible. In the quiet reflection of night, the reptilian phenomenon becomes more than a collection of accounts or symbols. It becomes a lens through which to observe our own minds, our shared histories, and our enduring fascination with the unknown. It is a story that continues to live because it touches something universal, a slow, lingering awareness that even in the calmest moments, the world may contain mysteries far greater than we can fully grasp. As the night deepens and the world around us settles into quiet stillness, it is the perfect time to let the mind wander gently into reflection. We have traveled together through centuries of myth, layers of testimony, and webs of investigation, encountering stories that span from the temples of ancient civilizations to the classified halls of modern military research, and even into the quiet recesses of the human mind. At each stage, the figure of the reptilian, whether as myth, symbol, psychological archetype, or alleged visitor, has persisted, a presence that is simultaneously elusive and profoundly resonant. Now, as the journey nears its close, it is worth slowing even further, letting the images, ideas, and reflections settle like soft dust in the quiet of the night. The reptilian narrative, with all its complexity, invites us not simply to consider the possibility of hidden beings, but to contemplate what it means to confront the unknown in any form. There is something deeply human about reaching toward a mystery, about feeling the tension between certainty and uncertainty, between the tangible and the imagined. Throughout history, humanity has been drawn to what lies just beyond understanding. Ancient serpent gods and deities, the tales of shapeshifters and underground dwellers, and the modern narratives of extraterrestrial observers all share a common thread. They speak to our fascination with forces that are intelligent, deliberate, and hidden from view. This fascination is not merely about fear or curiosity. It is about a profound desire to connect with the unknown, to find meaning in realms that elude easy comprehension. In this quiet moment, we can reflect on the nature of perception itself. What is it that causes one individual to see shadows in the corner of a room, and another to recall towering figures with scales and eyes that seem to understand more than the observer does? Human perception is filtered through countless variables: cultural context, personal experience, psychological state, and even the physiological rhythms of the brain. Modern science suggests that phenomena such as sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, or neurological responses to stress may account for some encounters. Yet these explanations, while compelling, do not diminish the power of the experience for those who report it. What remains is the awareness that the mind is capable of producing both incredible insight and vivid impressions, blending internal and external realities in ways that challenge our understanding of consciousness itself. Alongside these psychological considerations is the recognition of history and culture as shaping forces. Across continents and millennia, reptilian motifs have recurred with remarkable consistency. Mesopotamian deities, Mesoamerican serpent gods, and the Nagas of South Asia all present forms that are powerful, intelligent, and sometimes morally ambiguous. These figures were not merely entertainment. They served as symbols, teaching tools, and frameworks through which early societies interpreted authority, wisdom, danger, and transformation. In the modern era, popular media, literature, and internet culture have absorbed and reshaped these archetypes, creating a bridge between ancient symbolism and contemporary imagination. The persistence of such imagery speaks to something fundamental. The human mind seeks continuity, pattern, and meaning, even as the specifics of belief and interpretation evolve. The reptilian narrative also encourages reflection on power and control. Whether taken literally or metaphorically, these beings often represent hidden authority, forces that influence outcomes without being seen. This can be interpreted in multiple ways: as a projection of societal anxieties, as a symbolic embodiment of leadership and hierarchy, or as a literal suggestion of intelligence operating beyond human perception. In all interpretations, the underlying theme remains the same. The unknown is structured, purposeful, and capable of shaping events in ways that the average observer may not fully understand. Contemplating this idea quietly allows the mind to engage with complex questions without the pressure of immediate answers, fostering a gentle meditation on control, influence, and the unseen forces that shape our lives. Equally compelling is the way these stories highlight the interplay between the personal and the collective. Witness accounts, whether describing fleeting shadows or elaborate encounters, connect the individual's inner world with broader cultural patterns. Shared motifs, scaly skin, humanoid posture, deliberate movement, and telepathic communication appear across generations and geographies. Such consistency suggests that whether the experience is neurological, symbolic, or literal, it is filtered through universal cognitive frameworks. The reptilian narrative thus becomes a lens through which we can explore not only the nature of unexplained phenomena, but also the shared elements of human consciousness. It is a reminder that individual perception and collective imagination are deeply intertwined, each shaping and reinforcing the other. As we drift further into contemplation, it is also worth considering the emotional dimension of these narratives. Encounters with the unknown, whether experienced during waking hours, in dreams, or through meditation, often evoke profound feelings of awe, fear, curiosity, or even reverence. The reptilian figures are frequently described as commanding, intelligent, and purposeful, eliciting responses that range from apprehension to fascination. These emotional reactions are as important as the visual or narrative details, for they reveal the subtle ways humans engage with mystery. In the calm of night, Reflecting on these feelings allows for a safe exploration of emotions associated with power, observation, and the unseen. There's a quiet beauty in recognizing that mystery is not only about what exists outside ourselves, but also about what resides within, the capacity to feel, to wonder, and to imagine. The narrative journey we have taken, from ancient civilizations and mythological archetypes to eyewitness accounts, government documents, and modern investigations, reveals the reptilian phenomenon as a multifaceted story. It is simultaneously cultural, psychological, symbolic, and speculative. Each layer contributes to the tapestry, offering insights into human history, thought, and imagination. At the same time, the story preserves its central quality, mystery. Despite decades of research, technological observation, and scrutiny, the essence of the reptilian remains elusive, inviting reflection rather than resolution. This elusiveness is part of its enduring power, providing a space where curiosity, meditation, and imagination can coexist harmoniously. In this final quiet stage, it is helpful to release the need for definitive answers. The reptilian narrative, like many profound myths and mysteries, is less about arriving at certainty and more about the journey itself. By observing, listening, and reflecting, the mind engages with concepts that transcend ordinary experience, exploring ideas that are at once external and deeply internal. This engagement can be calming, meditative, and restorative, allowing thoughts to drift freely without the tension of urgency. Mystery becomes a companion, not a threat, and curiosity transforms into gentle contemplation. As sleep approaches and the body relaxes, imagine the reptilian story as a river winding through time, a current that carries fragments of ancient civilizations, modern testimonies, and cultural expressions into a shared stream of human consciousness. It flows quietly, carrying questions rather than answers, guiding the listener through reflections on authority, perception, and imagination. In this space, one can feel both the vastness of the unknown and the intimate landscape of personal thought, each complementing the other in a slow, meditative rhythm. Ultimately, the reptilian narrative invites us to embrace mystery with calm curiosity. It reminds us that some questions may remain unresolved, and that the pursuit of understanding can itself be a source of reflection, wonder, and quiet satisfaction. In the stillness of night, the unknown becomes a gentle companion, and the journey through stories, symbols, and reflections becomes an act of meditation. As the listener drifts toward sleep, the story lingers softly, a whisper of mystery and imagination that stretches across time and space, encouraging the mind to wander, to explore, and to rest in the comfort of the unknown.